Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a fascinating stack of sources, from editorial insights and opinion pieces to cutting-edge science and societal analyses.
Our mission, as always, is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight, basically giving you a shortcut to being really well-informed on quite a diverse range of topics.
Exactly. Let's jump right in. We're starting off today in the editorial section, tackling a really complex and, frankly, sensitive issue: adolescent relationships within India's legal framework.
Right, and specifically how the Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses Act, the POCSO Act, interacts with these situations.
What makes this particularly compelling right now is a recent Supreme Court judgment from May 2025, Right to Privacy of Adolescents. It seems like a remarkable instance of the court revisiting its stance and, crucially, prioritizing the young person's own voice.
That's exactly right. The case that really brought this into focus involved a 14-year-old girl from rural West Bengal. She left home to be with a 25-year-old man. They eventually married, had a child. Now, the initial POCSO Special Court, feeling bound by the strict letter of the law, sentenced the man to 20 years. A very long sentence.
Wow. Yeah.
But then in 2022, the Calcutta High Court took what it termed a humane view and actually reversed that conviction. They acknowledged that POCSO can sometimes, make adolescents vulnerable for what might otherwise be considered normative sexual behavior.
Okay, that sounds like a more nuanced approach.
It was, but they also, unfortunately, made some rather problematic comments suggesting female adolescents need to, quote, control sexual urges.
Ah, right. And I imagine those comments didn't go unnoticed.
Not at all. There was significant media outrage, which then prompted the Supreme Court to take the matter suo motu on its own initiative in December 2023.
And initially, the Supreme Court actually went the other way, didn't they? They restored the conviction.
They did, initially. And they seemed to reject concepts like non-exploitative sexual acts with a minor, or the idea of older adolescents, even though these concepts are recognized in international human rights law and medical terms.
So a bit of a legal back and forth there. But then came the shift.
Precisely. August 2024 was the pivotal moment. Before finalizing the sentence, the Supreme Court did something quite crucial. It directed an expert committee, a clinical psychologist, a social scientist, a child welfare officer, to actually go and find out what the young woman, now an adult, wanted.
That seems like a really important step, getting her perspective directly.
It was profound. The committee found that the real trauma she experienced wasn't from the relationship itself, but from the crushing legal consequences and what they termed the collective failure of the systems.
The system itself caused the harm.
Exactly. And the court concluded with this incredibly powerful realization, stating that true justice lies in not sentencing the accused, adding that if he were jailed, the worst sufferer will be the victim herself.
That's quite an admission. The irony is palpable.
It really is. The very system designed to protect ended up potentially causing more harm.
And it's interesting that while both courts said these specific cases shouldn't be treated as precedent, there's data suggesting these situations aren't uncommon.
That's right. Empirical studies show adolescent relationships, especially for those over 16, are quite common. An N-fold study found that nearly a quarter, 24.3%, of POCSO judgments involve romantic relationships.
And the victims often don't want to prosecute.
In a staggering 82% of those cases, the victims refuse to testify against the accused. It really highlights the mismatch between the law and lived reality.
So the Supreme Court itself called this a complete failure of our society and our legal system. That's strong language.
Very strong. It lays bare the tension between the POCSO Act's blanket approach and the realities of adolescent sexuality. The court's direction towards considering comprehensive sexuality education and life skills training is definitely a positive step.
So the takeaway is a need to possibly re-examine POCSO's application, maybe recognize conditional consent above 16 and non-coercive situations, and address the root causes.
Exactly. Address why young people might elope in the first place, rather than just criminalizing the relationships after the fact.
Okay, let's shift gears now from law at home to the broader global stage. There seems to be a major shift happening with the U.S., appearing to step back from multilateralism. What does that mean for global power dynamics?
Well, Donald Trump is often seen as sort of the figurehead of this shift, but it might be a deeper trend. The U.S. has arguably weakened the collective bargaining strength of the global South.
Oh,
by prioritizing strategic, commerce-focused bilateral deals instead of broad multilateral agreements.
Fragmenting the old order, essentially.
Precisely, leading to fragmentation. And it was quite striking, actually, at the BRICS summit in July 2025. The final declaration, despite being quite lengthy, didn't really acknowledge this U.S. rejection of multilateralism.
Interesting omission. Okay, let's unpack this. What does this state of flux mean for a country like India, especially given its potential third largest economy by 2027, maybe overtaking the U.S. by 2075? That's a huge potential shift.
Well, the analysis suggests India's answer lies in accepting that the old multilateralism is perhaps over. The focus needs to shift inwards to national prosperity and outwards towards stronger South-South cooperation.
So the old way of the global South acting as a unified UN voting bloc for financial benefits, that's not enough anymore.
It seems not. India needs tangible support, in elections for international posts. Remember losing the UNESCO VP spot to Pakistan, in shaping global rules and narratives.
Yeah.
This means India needs to define its strategic autonomy clearly.
Meaning neutrality between major powers.
Essentially, yes. Defining its interests through its own voting patterns, not just aligning with old blocs.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The idea of an Atmanirbhar Bharat, a self-reliant India, needing to look east, not west, for ideas. That means aligning trade concessions, say, with the U.S., alongside agreements with ASEAN nations, a regional rebalance.
Exactly. It's about strategic alignment. For instance, if India faces export losses, like with steel to the U.S., it can pivot. It can build massive internal infrastructure expressways, high-speed rail, data centers, much like China did to fuel its growth.
Using domestic demand as the engine.
Right. And India has this intrinsic strength in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The World Intellectual Property Organization noted India actually surpassed the UK and Germany in Gen AI patents published. That's a huge indicator of potential for endogenous growth.
It's not just economic either. Military doctrines globally are shifting integrated air defense, satellites, missiles, drones, cyber.
And India is actually in a position, maybe for the first time since independence, to become a leader in these advanced domains. This could mean less reliance on costly ground forces and imported weapon systems.
Which gives more foreign policy flexibility.
And creates domestic innovation spin-offs. This reevaluation also touches on old border issues. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh's comment about India and China not getting stuck in the past and working towards demarcation was received quite well in China, apparently.
And the Indus Waters Treaty with Pakistan, another potential area for trust building.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Pakistan seems keen to engage. The lesson, perhaps, from past operations like Operation Sindoor, where India strategically pulled back, is knowing when a military solution just isn't viable. Wisdom and restraint.
So looking ahead, the BRICS summit in India in 2026 seems like a key moment.
Absolutely. A chance to revitalize the global South, not by collective bargaining with the G7, but by sharing prosperity internally, reorienting tariffs, value chains, all towards meeting the growing consumption within the South itself, a fundamental shift in focus.
Okay, from the global stage, let's zoom back into a critical domestic debate, forest governance in India. We're looking specifically at community forest resource rights, or CFRR, under the Forest Rights Act of 2006.
Right, and this whole issue got highlighted recently by an incident in Chhattisgarh. The Forest Department there tried to designate itself as the main agency for implementing CFRR.
Which goes against the spirit of the act, doesn't it?
Fundamentally, CFRR is supposed to recognize the right of Gram Sabhas, the village assemblies, to manage their customary forests. It's about rectifying historical wrongs from colonial times when communities were dispossessed.
So what was wrong with the Chhattisgarh letter specifically?
Well, it basically tried to take away the Gram Sabha's legal authority. It insisted they follow a specific model plan from the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, MOTA, which isn't even legally required. And it even tried to stop other departments or NGOs from helping the Gram Sabhas with their planning.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like more than just a bureaucratic tussle.
Oh, definitely. While strong grassroots mobilization got the letter withdrawn, it really highlights this persistent pushback against the autonomy of Gram Sabhas in managing their forests. It questions the whole vision of the FRA.
Can you contrast the FRA's vision with the old way?
Sure. Historically, you had scientific forestry, which basically meant managing forests for timber production run by forest departments using working plans. This often led to forest decline, spread of invasive species,
Not exactly sustainable.
not really focused on local needs or biodiversity. The FRA is radically different. It recognizes that local communities are integral to the very survival and sustainability of forests. So under FRA, CFR management plans are made by the Gram Sabas based on their needs.
And these plans should integrate with, not be dictated by, the old working plans.
Exactly. In CFR areas, the Gram Sabas plan essentially replaces the Forest Department's working plan.
But there's a big gap between the law and reality, right? Lots of titles issued, but few plans made.
That's the problem. Over 10,000 Gram Sabas have CFRR titles, but less than 1,000 have prepared their management plans. Forest departments often resist delaying claims, trying to revoke titles, denying funds, often claiming communities lack scientific ability.
And even the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, MOTA, seems inconsistent.
Yeah, their stance has been a bit confusing. Initially, they allowed simple plan formats. But then, in a 2024 joint letter with the Environment Ministry, they suggested CFR plans should conform to the National Working Plan Code, the NWPC, and even involve foresters.
Which seems to undermine the Gram Saba's authority again.
Exactly. And the NWPC is heavily focused on timber yield, which just isn't suitable for the diverse livelihood needs that Gram Sabas have.
Right. It feels like there's a resistance to accepting that local lived experience and traditional knowledge is a form of science, maybe even better suited for complex local ecosystems and climate change impacts than rigid top-down plans.
That's a key argument. Gram Sabas often don't need complex, data-heavy formats because the knowledge is embedded in their daily life, their adaptive responses.
So what's the way forward here?
Well, frameworks like the Darti Abot Dijanjatia Gramut Karshafian offer indicative structures, not rigid templates. MOTA needs to firmly reject attempts to impose NWPC compliance, and forest departments need a mindset shift. Provide funds and protection, yes, but discard the old timber-oriented science for genuine, people-friendly forest management that values community autonomy and knowledge.
All right, from forests on the ground, let's cast our gaze outwards to the stars. A big question people often ask, has the search for alien life basically failed? Some researchers at ETH Zurich have a really interesting, nuanced take on this.
Yeah, it's less about failure and more about framing the question correctly. Since the 90s, we've found tons of exoplanets, right? And there have been, let's call them hints of life, but absolutely no solid proof yet.
Right, hints of hints isn't proof.
Exactly. So the ETH Zurich team argues that getting a result like no signs of life detected on a particular planet isn't a failure. It's actually valuable data that helps refine future searches. Every observation, even a negative one, carries information, though also uncertainty.
Okay, let's unpack this. How do you get information from not finding something? That sounds a bit paradoxical.
It's through a statistical approach called Bayesian analysis. Think of it like this. You start with an initial guess, or prior, about how common life might be. Then, as you observe more exoplanets and don't find life, you update that initial guess.
So the lack of findings adjusts your probability.
Precisely. Their simulation, looking at 100 exoplanets, suggests something interesting. If you examine, say, 40 to 80 exoplanets without finding any life signs, you can become reasonably confident that life is relatively rare, maybe on fewer than 10% to 20% of similar planets. If it were more common, you'd likely have found something in that sample size.
That makes sense. And here's where it gets really interesting. They talk about the need for better questions. Why is just asking, does this planet have life, kind of problematic?
Well, it's too broad. It risks false positives or maybe even false negatives. For example, a planet could have a tiny biosphere that just doesn't change the atmosphere enough for us to detect from light years away.
So you need more specific criteria.
Exactly. More informative questions would be like, does this planet have a surface temperature within X range? And does it have concentrations of molecules Y and Z above a certain threshold? This gives you clear, testable criteria, helps you select planets better, and avoids misinterpreting fuzzy data.
So what this all means is the success of the search isn't just about looking at more and more planets, but about asking sharper, more focused questions.
That's the core argument. It's quality of inquiry over sheer quantity of observation.
And this has big implications for upcoming missions.
Huge. For projects like LIFE, Large Interferometer for Exoplanets, and HWO, Habitable Worlds Observatory, which aim to look closely at dozens of Earth-like planets. The paper really stresses that alongside building amazing new telescopes, we need a lot more theoretical work on what actually counts as a reliable sign of life or definitive proof of habitability.
It boils down to that final quote, doesn't it?
It does. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence as long as we allow the right questions to lead us. It's about smart searching.
Moving now to another huge global challenge, but one that also holds significant opportunities for India: the push to decarbonize the global shipping industry by mid-century.
Yeah, this is a massive undertaking. Right now, most merchant ships run on things like very low sulfur fuel oil, VLSFO, diesel, or maybe liquid natural gas, LNG. LNG is seen more as a transition fuel, though.
Still fossil fuels, basically.
Right. The real future lies in green fuels. We're talking green ammonia, green or e-methanol, maybe advanced biofuels.
And how are these green fuels made?
Well, it starts with green hydrogen, which you get by splitting water using electrolysis powered by renewable energy like solar or wind. Then green ammonia is made from that green hydrogen plus nitrogen from the air. Green methanol combines green hydrogen with captured CO2, often from industrial sources.
Okay, let's unpack this. Shipping is often described as a pretty conservative industry, right? Slow to adopt new tech. Why is that, and which of these new fuels are actually gaining some momentum first?
It is conservative, yeah. Change is slow. Green methanol seems to be getting traction first. Why? Because it's almost a drop-in replacement for current fuels like VLSFO. It's a liquid at normal temperatures, easier to handle on board.
Easier transition, technically.
Exactly. Green ammonia, while having zero greenhouse gas emissions when burned, needs more complex onboard processing. And we're already seeing movement over 360 methanol-capable ships are either in service or on order now.
That's quite a few, but the cost must be a major hurdle.
Oh, absolutely. E-methanol is estimated around $1,950 per ton equivalent, compared to maybe $560 for VLSFO. That massive difference is mainly down to the cost of renewable electricity and the huge upfront investment needed for electrolyzer plants.
And demand is already outpacing supply.
Projected demand for green methanol, 14 million tons by 2028, looks set to exceed the projected supply of 11 million tons. That's going to keep prices high, at least initially.
So where does India fit into this picture? What are its plans?
India is already working on decarbonizing its own domestic shipping, supporting container ships using green fuels, setting up green fuel bunkering points at ports like Tuticorin and Kandla. But the bigger ambition is to become a major supplier of green fuels to global shipping.
Especially to hubs like Singapore.
Exactly. Singapore handles nearly a quarter of global ship fueling. Given India's potential for solar power generation, becoming a key supplier is a real possibility.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How can India realistically achieve that ambition, become a marine green fuels hub, given the challenges like cost and needing imported tech?
It's definitely challenging, importing solar panels, electrolyzers. But look at India's solar energy boom from under 3 gigawatts in 2014 to over 100 gigawatts now. That happened because of things like sovereign guarantees, assured demand, and policy support.
So applying that model to green fuels,
Yeah.
sovereign guarantees could de-risk projects.
Precisely. They could lower the cost of capital dramatically. Getting loans from multilateral development banks at, say, 4% instead of 11–12% from domestic lenders makes a huge difference to the final fuel price.
And other financial tools, like PLI schemes.
Yeah, production-linked incentives for making electrolyzers locally, incentives for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, CCUS, to get the CO2 needed for e-methanol. India is pushing aggressively for 1.5 GW of local electrolyzer manufacturing and has growing industrial CO2 sources. It's about building the whole ecosystem.
And could this actually help revive Indian shipbuilding and shipowning?
That's a key part of the strategy. The government is providing demand-side support for shipbuilders, encouraging cooperation with leaders like South Korea and Japan to build capacity. There's a pledge of $10 billion to support buying over 110 new ships.
With a push for a percentage of those to be green-fueled and built in India.
Exactly. Incentivizing 10–20% to be green fuel capable, built domestically, and Indian flagged. It's a multi-pronged approach to boost the maritime sector while driving the green transition.
Okay, let's shift focus again, this time to something fundamental to India's identity: its incredible linguistic diversity. This is often seen as a key factor protecting the nation's secular character and unity.
Absolutely. It's a defining feature. But, like religion, language can sometimes become a point of friction, a barrier, as we've unfortunately seen with some recent tensions in Maharashtra.
Right. It's important to understand how Indian secularism works here, isn't it? It's not quite the same as the Western model.
Not exactly. Western secularism often implies a strict separation of state and religion. In India, it's woven into the constitution through rights to religious freedom, tolerance, equality, but it uniquely extends this principle to language as well.
So the state isn't pro or anti any specific language.
Correct. It's empowered to act against both religious and linguistic communalism, aiming for balance and non-discrimination.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why doesn't India have, and why can't it have, a single national language? This confuses some people.
It's precisely to protect that linguistic diversity. The Constitution's 8th schedule recognizes 22 official languages. Article 343 makes Hindi and Devanagari script the official language of the Union, the central government. But crucially, states are free to choose their own official language or languages.
Reflecting that federal structure.
Exactly. It reflects India as a unitary federation, diverse but united. No state can secede based on language or culture. The idea is integration, not imposition.
And Article 29 provides further protection.
Yes, it guarantees the right of any section of citizens, including minorities, to protect their distinct language, script, or culture. And it explicitly says language cannot be grounds for discrimination in areas like education access.
The scale of this diversity is just immense, isn't it?
It really is. The 2011 census recorded 121 distinct languages and 270 mother tongues. And about 96.7% of the population speaks one of those 22 scheduled languages as their mother tongue. It's an incredible linguistic tapestry.
So what this all means is protecting this diversity, showing respect for every single language, regardless of region or state, is seen as absolutely essential for maintaining India's linguistic secularism and its unity.
Absolutely critical. And historically, there's been strong resistance, particularly in southern and northeastern states, against attempts to impose Hindi, driven by fears of cultural domination. Think of the Dravidian movements in Tamil Nadu.
And the recent issues in Maharashtra are slightly different, more identity politics than cultural protection.
That seems to be the analysis, yes. Violence against non-Marathi populations framed as identity politics, which feels like a departure from India's generally liberal and tolerant historical attitude towards its internal diversity.
So the responsibility lies heavily with political actors to uphold this constitutional protection of diversity.
Very much so. The Constitution provides strong shields, but political actions matter. The warning is clear. Leaning towards linguistic conservatism could fragment society and damage that secular fabric.
Okay, for our final deep dive today, let's look at the cybercrime situation in Delhi. The numbers are alarming. Residents lost over 700 crore in 2024 alone.
A staggering figure. And despite this, the report highlights persistent structural gaps. For instance, the IT Act requires an inspector rank officer to investigate cybercrime, but most police stations just don't have one readily available.
So, capacity issues. A Lagnita CSDS study dug into this, looking at public awareness, personal experiences, and how well reporting systems work. What did they find about awareness?
Awareness of traditional scams is actually quite high. Over 90% know about OTP sharing risks, fake reward calls, fraudulent banking requests, the usual suspects.
Good baseline awareness, then.
Yes, but awareness dropped significantly for newer, more complex scams like digital arrest. Only 61% knew about that one. And while most people, 93%, knew they could file a complaint somewhere, knowing where was a different story.
The practical knowledge gap.
Exactly. Only 42% knew the national helpline number, 1930. Even fewer knew about dedicated cyber police stations, 25%, or the official reporting website, 30%. So a gap in digital reporting literacy is quite evident.
What about government awareness campaigns? Are they reaching people?
Mass messages seem well recognized, 72% awareness. But more targeted initiatives, like the Cyber Swatch at Kendra, have very low visibility, just 19%.
And effectiveness ratings weren't great either.
Not overwhelmingly positive. Only 16% found government efforts very effective. About 55% said somewhat effective, but nearly 1 in 4 found them inadequate. So mixed reviews, leaning towards needing improvement. In terms of prevention, people are doing the basics. Most avoid suspicious links, 87%, download apps from trusted places, 85%, use strong passwords, 79%.
And maybe not the more advanced stuff.
Right? Things like changing passwords regularly or using antivirus software are less common, both around 50%. So basic hygiene is there, but maybe not deeper defense.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting. The study found a stark socioeconomic digital divide in protection.
Yes, this is a major finding. High-income individuals are far more likely to use comprehensive security measures. For example, 73% use antivirus compared to only 20% in low-income groups. Two-step authentication, 75% versus 31%.
That's a huge gap, driven by illiteracy, cost, access.
All of the above, most likely. And this translates to confidence. While most people feel somewhat protected, Confidence varies hugely by income. 89% of high-income folks feel protected versus just 61% of low-income individuals. This suggests higher vulnerability, probably higher stress, for less privileged groups. Interestingly, over half think data protection is a shared responsibility between individuals and the government.
Let's talk about actually experiencing and reporting fraud. Awareness of online financial fraud itself is nearly universal, 96%. But what did people hear about it?
Mostly non-institutional sources. Social media, 38%. Traditional media, 37%. Friends and family, 36%. Banks, surprisingly, only accounted for 8% of awareness.
How did victims realize they'd been defrauded?
Mostly through transaction alerts, 38%. The impact was significant. 58% lost money, 26% suffered mental stress. Loss amounts varied, but a big chunk, 27%, lost between $10,000 and $50,000, and 14% lost over $50,000. And here's perhaps the most worrying statistic. Recovery is incredibly poor. Almost half, 48%, believe lost money couldn't be recovered. And the reality, 70% of actual victims recovered absolutely nothing.
70%, that's dismal.
Dismal. Only 17% got a full recovery, 6% partial. It really points to a failure in institutional financial redressal mechanisms.
And this likely impacts reporting rates.
You'd think so. Only 21% of victims actually reported the crime. A massive 76% didn't, often citing lack of awareness of how to report or just plain mistrust in the system.
And when they did report, they used traditional methods more.
Yes. Local police stations, 29%, cybercrime cells, 26%, banks, 24%, were more common than the dedicated website, 20%, or helplines, 15%. People still lean towards physical reporting channels. Views on the reporting process itself were mixed. About a third found it easy, but over a third found it difficult. And satisfaction with the support received was low, 48% dissatisfied. Yet despite all this, confidence in digital payment apps remained high.
That's fascinating. And what did people want the government to prioritize?
Awareness campaigns came out on top, 40%, seen as more important even than technical fixes. People feel the need for better information and guidance.
So, summing up the Delhi cyber landscape, high awareness of basic threats, but low trust in institutions, huge underreporting, poor recovery rates, and significant digital divides, especially hitting low-income groups hardest.
Exactly. Bridging those gaps in knowledge, access, and especially trust seems absolutely crucial to improving cybersecurity for everyone. It really underscores the need for a concerted effort.
Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one.
You can give suggestions by contacting our Twitter handle, given in the episode description. We're always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about.
We wish you a great day.